Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast, where we celebrate individuals and families, businesses, and organizations that seek out and promote the exploration, stewardship, conservation, access, and enjoyment of the outdoors. Our guest today is Kris Millgate. Kris is the CEO of Tightline Media and an Emmy-nominated outdoor journalist who documented disappearing salmon across the Northwest. In today's Outdoor Adventure Series episode, Kris chats with us about her current project, a new wildlife film on Grizzly Ground. Kris, it is a pleasure to have you back on the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me back, Howard. It's always fun to visit with you.
Fantastic. Now, the word grizzly in my intro there, it makes me shiver. I've only ever seen them. I've been to the zoo, but that just does not count. But I've never seen them in the wild. And as someone who lives up in the Northwest and in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, as you've described on your website, grizzlies are like your next door neighbor.
Yeah, grizzlies do live in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, and that is where I live, work, and play. And it adds a dynamic to the landscape that you just don't find anywhere else in the lower 48. I mean, the reason we have grizzlies here is because we still have vast swaths of undeveloped land. There are a lot of places in America that can't say that. So you have to have space, major chunks of space, in order to have grizzly bears wandering. But even with that, there's still trouble spots. You know, that if a bear gets into trouble, most likely it's because we've done something that's caused them to become a trouble bear. And you don't want to see that happen. I mean, half a century ago, we decided we wanted grizzly bears to come back. They were almost extinct, and they're still on the endangered species list, but they've made a decent comeback. And now we have to figure out how to live with them on the landscape.
When you mentioned that they had nearly gone extinct, at least in this area, well, first off, are grizzlies only found in this Greater Yellowstone area?
Grizzly bears are found in the Greater Yellowstone area, which would include parts of Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming, Yellowstone National Park, and Grand Teton National Park.
Right.
The bears in those areas that I just said are considered Greater Yellowstone bears.
Okay.
Then you have like Northern Continental Divide grizzly bears, which are Montana and Canada. Then you also have bears in Alaska. But when you're talking about what people think about when they think about the classic Yellowstone grizzly bear that people used to go into Yellowstone to feed a century ago, those are Greater Yellowstone bears. And it took several decades to undo the bad habit of letting people come in the park and feed the bears.
And that was actually going to be one of my questions somewhere down the line. I've seen the videos, and you can't get by anything without seeing a TikTok video or an Instagram, is somebody driving and there's bears and they roll down a window and they put their hand out, which is a big mistake, I would imagine, trying to feed the bears. And that develops a bad habit. And also, I would imagine it endangers both the human and the bear.
A lot of times people say, you're following grizzlies. You realize that a grizzly can kill you. Yes, I'm aware that a grizzly can kill me. I know that. I never forget that. But what scares me most when I'm in bear country is not the bears. It's the people.
Yeah.
And the way people behave around bears is very unnerving and uncomfortable. And I think that's what causes a lot of the trouble, is it's how we're behaving. These bears have figured out how to live among us, but we haven't quite figured out how we're supposed to behave among them. And that's when you're seeing all those uncomfortable things of people getting too close to any animal. And I went through the Yellowstone National Park archives, and I went back a century while I was working on this new film, and I found the most startling images. There were places where the park would put out the garbage, and then they put bleachers around the garbage, and the garbage was for the bears. The bleachers were for the people that came to watch the bears eat the garbage. I mean, it was a tourist attraction.
Oh my.
And those pictures are incredible to look at right now because we know that's not how we should behave. But a century ago, we thought differently. And then there was all kinds of pictures, even clear up into the 60s, of 2, 3, 4 bears up on a car window. Those things are kind of embedded in our history with grizzly bears, even though they are not supposed to go on today.
It's like Barnum and Bailey in the wild, and this it's like,
It's true. There are a lot of times when I feel like it's a circus scene and I'm watching. And the one thing that really freaks people out at a bear jam is when I put my camera on the people instead of the bears. They've come to see the show, which is the bear. They don't want to be the show. But when I'm
right.
trying to show you as an audience what it's like at a bear jam, shot footage of the people at the bear jam. And that makes everybody uncomfortable because they don't want the lens. They don't want the lens on them. They just want to look at the animal in kind of this unintentional circus setting at this point.
Wow. I recall in one of your videos, you had bears out in the distance feeding, and it's hard to tell if it was 100 yards or 200 yards. And there's this whole lineup of folks with these big long lenses. I would probably be one of those, taking photos. It's like they're on display, but they're in the wild there. And it's just, I don't know. It's nice. I'd want to do it. It's like, it's our version of the big five. You go to Africa and you get I don't know if it's the big five, but you get the tigers, the elephants, the giraffes, the lions. Here in the US, that grizzly bear is probably one of the top targets of what folks want to see when they go out west. And
Yeah, it's
beautiful.
pretty. Grizzlies are pretty iconic. And I think
Yeah,
that uh, I can think of the situations that you're thinking of. And I know in particular, one in specific, there was a major highway between us and the animals. Another one, a major river was between us and the animals. But when you see those long lenses, that's actually comforting to me because
okay.
that means those people, that crowd of people are really far away from the animal, even if their shots look close. In my film, you will see shots that look close. That is a zoom lens.
Okay.
What gets really alarming is when you show up at a bear jam and everybody there has a phone. You can't zoom in very well with your phone, and everybody wants that picture of the animal, and they're moving in close. And if it's a grizzly with 2 cubs and you're moving in with a cell phone for a picture, that is disaster.
Oh,
So you can show close stuff with a long lens
yeah,
and be extremely far away from that animal without disturbing it. You have to remember, you're in their home. They're
right.
in the wild. You're visiting. You're in their house. You need to be respectful of their space.
Yeah, don't let me get started on the selfie. That's bad news. So I'm curious, what led you to want to plan and produce this project?
On Grizzly Ground comes close on the hills of Ocean to Idaho.
Right.
And when I produced Ocean to Idaho, I wanted to follow salmon migration
Uh-huh.
and show you what that migration route looks like. As soon as that film came out, people started saying, "What's next?" Which
Uh,
I find exciting and anxiety inducing at the same time. Exciting because that means you're into it. You want to connect with the wild. You want to see what happens when the wild tries to make its way with us in the way. And I love that. That means I'm doing something that you want. That's what I want my work to do, connect you with the outdoors. But at the same time, I say it's anxiety inducing because you're asking for what's next before I even know. And so while I was touring with the film about salmon, people were saying, "What's next?" And it's pretty hard to top an epic salmon migration. But what do you want to top it with? Well, you top it with something that devours fish, right?
mhm.
And that's grizzlies. And because grizzlies can migrate more than 1,000 miles in one summer, I thought if I can figure out a way to follow grizzly bears and not put myself at risk, and not put the bears at risk, but show you what they go through when they're trying to make their way with us in the way, that'd be pretty compelling. And so that's why I decided to follow that. There's a common theme there, salmon and grizzlies. They're both on the endangered species list.
Mhm.
So that's part of the intrigue as well.
Okay. What makes the Yellowstone grizzlies and their habitats so important? And why should we care
I think a lot of times people focus on what they focus on the parts that have to do with safety. Like if I'm in the woods and there's grizzly bears in that woods, all of a sudden I'm not top of the food chain. That's uncomfortable for a lot of people. But then think about it in a different way. Think about what it is that grizzly bears do for us on the landscape. If there is a grizzly bear present on a landscape, that means that landscape is intact, large enough, healthy enough to sustain a major predator. There are so many places in this country where that landscape is never going to host an animal like that ever again because it's changed so much. So even if you never see a grizzly, even if you never get to spend time in Yellowstone, knowing that there are places on this planet that still exist that we haven't totally screwed up yet,
Mm.
and the wild can still be there, that means something to us, even if we never can tangibly touch that place. It's a comfort to know that places exist that we haven't totally exhausted and, for lack of a better word, ruined.
I'm curious about, as a predator, an apex predator, what are the sustainability, health, and food sources for the grizzly bear?
Grizzly bears are opportunists.
Ah,
What sustains a grizzly bear is anything they can stick in their mouth. So
okay.
that runs the gamut from elk calves to ants. I mean, they can lay down in the afternoon in the shade in the forest behind a fallen log, roll that log over. I just saw a bunch of logs roll over just a few days ago. They roll the log over, lay down on its bed and breakfast. They nap while it's hot. They stick their claws in that log and underneath that log, and they eat ants. Hundreds and hundreds of ants. They can just lick them up. People don't even realize it, but the ants count as a food source. They eat berries. They eat moths. They eat any animal they can get, preferably that someone else has killed, so they don't have to do that part. But
Okay.
they'll eat anything that they can find, roadkill, garbage. They'll eat your gas can. They'll lick your barbecue grill. They want the seed in your bird feeder. All those things people aren't thinking about. If it has a smell, a bear's going to eat it. If you have toothpaste in your tent, a tube of toothpaste in your tent, that smells pretty good. They're going to want to eat that too. So you have to start thinking about it. If they are motivated, those 1,000 miles in the summer, they're food motivated. They move those 1,000 miles looking for something to eat. And they want to fatten up before they go back into hibernate. So it's all about finding something to eat for them.
And you said something early on. I just saw a couple logs turned over. So for our listeners, with as much discretion as you want, because all of a sudden you're going to have fans camping out in front of your house. Whereabouts in Idaho are you located?
I live in eastern Idaho. Idaho
Okay.
Falls, Idaho is where I am based.
Okay.
And I'm about an hour and a half, maybe a little less than that, from the west entrance to Yellowstone National Park.
Okay.
More than 4 million people visit Yellowstone National Park. So I spend less time in the park itself, park proper, versus the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem.
Okay.
Greater Yellowstone ecosystem is Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. I spend a lot of time in all of those places. And if I'm taking a backpacking trip with my two boys and they're learning how to backpack and how to filter water and how to carry their house on their back, I'll be honest with you, we do not go into the Yellowstone backcountry. We go into central Idaho wilderness where I know there are no grizzlies there yet. There are
Okay.
black bears there, but there's no grizzlies there. So I make conscious decisions about where I play based on who I'm with and what I'm doing and how safe I want to feel while I'm there. And sometimes I am definitely in grizzly country and I'm there, and I know I'm in there. I'm not just there by accident. And then in other times, I want to be where I don't have to worry about looking over my shoulder while I'm throwing flies at fish. So I won't go where grizzly bears are to do that.
Okay. I remember back in, where were we? We were in Casper last year, and I remember we had the demo day where all the vendors went out, and like Toyota and the fly fishing folks were out there for us to enjoy. And for our listeners, uh, I know Kris via our our membership to the Outdoor Writers Association of America. Kris has more history with them than I do, but I remember we were sitting on a bench at this river, and I'm just happy to be there. I'm an out of shape Midwesterner, or I was at the time. Still need to be in better shape, and you asked me a question. You said, Howard, where would you launch the fly into the river? And I kind of said, well, I probably would do it there. And I was like halfway correct, because how you throw the fly, then it kind of travels how the river is traveling. And I'm curious, and there was a reason I'm kind of leading up to this. In Alaska, the big thing was watching bears catch salmon on the river, and everybody else is on the various observation areas watching the bears. When you're out there fishing and throwing a fly into the water, are you looking over your shoulder, or is this in this area there's just not going to be any grizzlies? Maybe or black bears. There's perhaps other less apex predator type animals.
So when I'm fishing in bear country, I carry bear spray.
Okay.
And it's not buried in my backpack. It's on my hip. And if I'm going through some tall willows,
Yeah.
I mean, I'll get it out and put it in my hand, even for a moose. Moose are taller than me, and the willows are taller than me. I can't see what's coming through. So also, even bird hunting. I've been with friends and we've been stalked by mountain lion. So you can use bear spray for more than just bears. I
Okay.
think it's good to have it with you all the time. That said, there are places where I go that I know there are no grizzly bears there. And that's pretty much most of the United States. There might be black bears, but grizzly bears are in rare places. And
Okay.
if I'm fishing in those areas and the water's really loud, like the current of the river is really riffly and I
Mhm.
can't hear anyone coming up behind me, I will look up my shoulder quite a bit, or I will move to the middle of the water and fish toward the bank so I can see. But there's one picture when I was on the road for On Grizzly Ground, and it's early summer, and I'm in grizzly bear country, and it's this beautiful wildflower meadow, and the mountains in the background, and some aspens, and it's had rain, so everything was green, but the flowers are yellow and purple and white, and it's beautiful. And I crouched down in the meadow in the wildflowers to get a shot, and the flowers are about as tall as me. And I think this is going to be a fantastic shot. And I'm looking over my shoulder the whole time. And it's a shot I'm not ever going to use because I was so worried about what was maybe happening behind me or what might come in on me like a bear that I wouldn't hear or see, that I didn't realize that there's a big, long power line running through my shot
Mm.
because I was shooting, but I was also looking over my shoulder. So it's a distraction. And you have to decide when you want to deal with the distraction because you can't ignore it. You've got to be aware of your safety. But if I need to really relax, I'll tell you right now, I don't put my tent up in grizzly bear country anymore. I want to sleep in a hard-sided camper or trailer
Mhm.
in bear country. But I still see people out in tents. So
Sure.
I think it's a comfort level on a personal thing. But on the Alaska thing, I've done that. I've gone and watched grizzly bears eat salmon in Alaska, and it delivers a huge sense of false security. You can watch grizzly bears eat salmon in Alaska. The reason you can do that without dying is because they have so many salmon that they don't really care what you're doing. And they have so many salmon, they're only eating the eggs. They're not even eating the fish. They're just eating the eggs that come out of the fish.
Right.
That dynamic does not exist in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. They are not so fed that they're going to ignore you when you get close. Ever. They're going to eat trout. They're going to eat fish, but they don't have a surplus of salmon to eat in the Greater Yellowstone area. They don't even have salmon to eat. So you can never stand close and watch a bear eat and think it's not going to respond. That's a magic only, a luxury only offered in Alaska.
Wow. And you're definitely not an appetizer or fast food. You are a full-blown entree there. I'm curious now, after the initial shock of people asking you, so Kris, what's your next project? What did it take to logistically plan and produce this project? Because this is a whole different kind of challenge than, when you were doing Ocean, Idaho. So what went into planning this production?
The logistics of planning a major production, like following salmon migration or following grizzlies for summer, is almost it's mind-boggling at first. They're both endangered animals, the salmon and the grizzlies. So
Hmm.
what's to my benefit? The benefit is because they're both endangered, they're both monitored closely by the federal government. Salmon have tags in their bellies that can be tracked. So when you're following the migration route, you know where the fish are because as they cross all the dams, the tag that's in their belly sends a signal, and you know you're right with them. Kind of the same thing with grizzlies. Grizzly bears don't have tags in their bellies. They have big collars around their necks that are bigger than belts
Oh,
for
wow.
your waist. And those collars have a GPS signal that transmits so their locations can be documented. Now, I didn't go around following collar bears and wanting to be right where they were. If anything, it was, oh, here's where the bears are. Don't go there today. But because they're so monitored, it's something that kind of takes a little bit of the hurdle out because you can follow them. And then you think about how am I going to tell this story? And the way that you tell the story about a hot button issue, whether it be salmon or grizzlies, is perspective. And you want perspective from everybody. On salmon, it was an argument over dams. Do we keep the dams or do we take the dams out and maybe the fish will return? That's what you argue about on salmon. It's not salmon recovery. It's whether or not we should keep the dams. On grizzlies, it's different. Salmon are disappearing. Grizzlies are recovering. Their numbers look pretty good. So why are they still on the endangered species list? The big point where people butt their heads on grizzlies is not necessarily whether or not they should be protected. It's whether or not they should be hunted.
Mm.
Every time grizzly bears are taken off the endangered species list, there's a possibility that the states in the West will offer a hunting season. And a lot of people don't think that should happen. Eagles were on the endangered species list at one point too, but they've been off since 2007 and we've never hunted them. Wolves were on the endangered species list as well. The West hunts wolves.
Mhm.
Grizzly bears come off the endangered species list. There's a possibility they'll be hunted, which is an area of issue, right? That's where the heads butt together. And when I'm covering a dynamic topic like grizzly bears, you want that moment where people butt heads and you want to hear what all the perspectives are around that moment. Why do people want them hunted? Why don't they want them hunted? And that kind of how you build out your story as you add perspective. Then you also want to include what does it mean for everyday people and where they live, work, and play? How does an animal impact our lives? And that's how you get the connection with the audience is showing them, you know what? You leave your cooler out, that bear's going to rip the cover off and eat everything in it. And that's an everyday situation that people can relate to. And then you build the story from there.
Okay. So I'm curious, and I think I might know the answer to this, but y- as an accomplished journalist, when you are doing these interviews, I would imagine you have to remain unbiased so that you can ask the questions, gather the information from the interview. How difficult is that so that you are getting the various perspectives on where people are on this protection, conservation versus, yeah, I want to go hunt?
Mm. I think a lot of people think it's impossible to keep your opinion out. I don't think that's true. I disagree with the people that say that's impossible. Simply because I've done my job for more than 20 years.
Right.
And maybe at this point I'm considered an old school journalist in the era of social media, but I was trained to tell a story without my opinion being part of it. There is no I in news. I come from traditional broadcast news background. It's about being fair, accurate, balanced, and unopinionated. That's how I tell the story. And when I call and say, I want to interview you about whatever the topic is, and they say to me, what's your agenda? My agenda is to just tell the story fair, accurate, balanced, and unopinionated. What I think doesn't matter. It's not about what I think. It's about what you think. And I want to lay out all the facts for you on the table, and then you can decide what side of the issue you fall on. That's how I do my job. Now, as things progressed, especially with social media, people started to say, Yeah, it's really interesting. I want to know about that collar on that bear's neck that's bigger than a belt around your waist. I want to know what that's like. But you know what? I want to know what it's like to do your job. I want to know what it's like to go nose to nose with a grizzly bear. And all of a sudden, that eye perspective starts having a place. And I actually had to learn how to put I into stories because in news, you don't write with the I form. And so for me, the best way to do that is to put everything that happens in front of the camera in the film. Here's the issue. And everything that happens behind the camera, to me, stitches included, all that goes in a book. And that's where I can write more personal, more behind the scenes, more of that perspective that people want when they want to hear from me, Kris Millgate, versus me, the journalist.
Okay. How are projects like On Grizzly Ground and just serving to help us understand and the importance of maintaining the wild places and preserving these habitats? Because there's so many threats to our the habitats these days. You've got water issues, you've got climate change, you've got developers, and even within the public lands, people who want to mine for natural resources. But how does a project like yours help to inform the public about why it's important to protect these spaces?
A project like On Grizzly Ground delivers hope. And I think a lot of people are looking for that. I've covered outdoor and environment for more than 2 decades. And man, on some days it is depressing. You can only cover so many losses without going, wow, there's a theme here. And grizzly bears are a success story. Yes, they're still on the endangered species list. They've grown from less than 200 in the 80s to more than 1,000 today in the Yellowstone area. That is success. We should celebrate that success, regardless of how many challenges are in front of us. The one thing the pandemic did that I would call a positive is it made us more aware of our natural resources around us. I feel like I've done stories for more than 20 years, and I could go back and do them all again right now because people are finally paying attention to what's going on outside. Now, our woods and our rivers are the places we go to play with our families. They're the places we go to escape the crazy. And that matters. And I want my projects to help people connect with the outside world because in all reality, the outside world is what sustains us. It's what keeps us alive regardless of what we do to it. And because of us and in spite of us, we have all these things in place, but we also have development, mining, logging, drilling, all those things will still take place. But you know what? Natural resources now have a seat at the table. And all of a sudden we have this new awareness. It's like, hey, maybe what this place holds as a value is more about what we get by leaving it as it is versus what we get when we take out of it, like development, logging, mining, drilling. That's all going to happen. But now there's a seat at the table for the intrinsic value of what our natural resources hold. And those things are important to us now. And maybe 50, certainly a century ago, we didn't think about them in that way. They were for us to use and get something out of. Now we realize that they hold value when left as they are.
Okay. As a viewer takes the opportunity to watch on Grizzly Ground, what would you like them to take away from the experience of watching this documentary? And what actions are going to be available for them to take?
I heard 2 questions there. The first is what awareness do I want them to have
Mhm.
when they watch On Grizzly Ground? And the other is what actions.
What
On the
actions? Yeah.
awareness side, I want you to connect with the natural world. It was here long before us. It will be here long after us. And we just need to recognize that we are part of this whole wild system. So it's an awareness. Connect with our natural resources. Showing films like On Grizzly Ground shows you what happens in the wild. Sometimes when we're not there, they're doing their own thing. And sometimes it's really neat to see what that is. I'm going to show you what that is.
Mhm.
That raises awareness. And then it also causes you to maybe want to go like, hey, you know what? Maybe it's something as simple as don't litter. Like, don't leave your garbage out. Animals will eat that and it's not good for them. It's not good for them, just like it's not good for you. On the action side, beyond don't litter, there are simple things people can do, whether they're in grizzly bear country or just black bear country. Simple things like don't leave your food out on the picnic table, lock your coolers, carry bear spray. Don't, don't leave your garbage out. Close the door on your camper. That's a big one. Animals can get inside, even raccoons. So there's little simple action steps that people can take. And also, if there's an area that's closed to vehicles, there's a lot of closed roads in the forest that are closed for a good reason. And a lot of times it's because those are illegal roads that people have made that weren't supposed to be there. And the Forest Service will go back and close that road. And it's closed. Maybe you can hike in, but if it says closed to vehicles, don't drive your vehicle in there because once you make a track, that's a scar that doesn't go away.
Right.
So just being more mindful of what the natural order of things is on the landscape and letting that order stay. We have plenty of places we've already mucked up with concrete and parking lots. Let other places be as they are without all of our concrete jungle and development. There's room for that, but there's also a space that needs to be allowed for the natural world to persist.
Very good. I'm curious, in the time you had spent outdoors and doing the research and the shooting, and again, looking at the videos, I see photography, I see video, I see drone work, I see a really nice truck, a camper. Who are all the collaboration partners to help make this a reality for you?
I collaborate with significant partners in significant ways,
Okay.
but none of them are cameras. I now have 8 cameras in my covey that I work with in the field.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know any of those makers. I did have some help on some trail cams this last project for grizzlies, but that was just in learning how to use the camera. So all of my gear and the expense of all my gear is on me.
Okay.
And when I'm looking for a partner that I want to work with to fund a major project like On Grizzly Ground, it is a major undertaking that costs me physically, financially, emotionally, professionally, all those things. And in order to pull it off, I have to have companies that will throw in with me from the get-go. I can't go do this and go in the hole just trying to get it done. It's not a hobby. This is my profession. So I need to be able to earn money to feed my family. Toyota has been a partner on my salmon project and on my grizzly project, as has 4-wheel campers. They are significant players in the outdoor space, but they also recognize that what I'm contributing to the outdoor space is also significant. When they come in, they're throwing in with a credible project, but it comes with a caveat. They don't get to dictate how the story turns out. I have to keep that editorial control in order to secure the journalistic integrity of the product. They can't tell me how the story will go. A good example is on salmon. I had a company come to me and say, we will give you double what you're asking if you will not focus on the dams. And dams are a big issue when it comes to fish. There are walls in the water. When that company came to me and said, I'll give you double what you're asking to pull off this production, if you don't look at the dams, I had zero funding. But I also had to say, absolutely not, without zero time thought about it, because they were trying to dictate how the story went. I need partners that trust me to do my job right, knowing that they're associating with a credible project that people want to learn about without dictating how the story comes out. I will not compromise the journalistic integrity of an issue, and so it can't be dictated by a funder, but I need funding partners to partner with me to pull this off. If I'm living and working out of a truck and camper, it's a significant investment for a funder like Toyota or 4-wheel camper. But they know that in the end, the return on the investment is tenfold because I'm going to deliver a story that people are going to want to watch and they're going to want to read.
Very good. So it was interesting. It was actually about 2 years ago that I first interviewed you on the podcast for the salmon book. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. It's 2 years later. And now On Grizzly Ground is coming out. What what can we expect that's going to be happening now or and in the near future as this project comes to fruition? What's going to be happening?
So you did say there's 2 years between salmon and grizzlies, and people
Yeah.
might say, God, that seems like a long time. It's the snap of your fingers, really. I mean, I was thinking about what was next the night that salmon premiered in 2021. And so people would think, oh, she's already thinking about what's next. But yeah, I'm always thinking about what's next. I don't know what it's going to be. But I also think it's important to enjoy where we're at now. I spent months and months in my office setting up On Grizzly Ground. And then I spent 6 more months in the field shooting On Grizzly Ground. And then 6 more months editing On Grizzly Ground. It takes a huge feat of patience to take 17 hours of footage and shove it into 26 minutes. And that's what On Grizzly Ground is now. So I think right now we enjoy how this rolls out, which means the film tour. The world premiere of On Grizzly Ground is in August in my hometown in Idaho Falls. And then it shows in other states in the West as the film tour unrolls. It's entered in film festivals. It's going to air on PBS stations. It has virtual screenings online. It has a book, My Place Among Beasts, which is the backstory on making the film. That rolls out at the same time. And so it's got about a 2-year process that's just starting now after 2 years of working on it. It's coming out as a premiere while salmon is still actually touring in certain places. So everything kind of snowballs and rolls. And while everything's been shot and edited to now, the next phase would be considered distribution, which will go for at least 2 years, if not longer.
Okay. And I do want to say I am not going to be asking you what your next project is. I will not ask you that.
That's a relief because I would really get nervous, but certainly I'm thinking of something. But I think it's also important to recognize when a project reaches another milestone or when it starts to go on tour. We should
Right.
get to enjoy that and celebrate that for a minute.
Most definitely. Before we head out and you share for our listeners the best place to learn more about you and your work, as you look back at your career and your accomplishments, and I know there's much more to come. What's been your aha moment in for your career and the type of work you are producing now versus when you were that hardcore journalist those many years ago? What's been your aha moment?
I first started in TV news and I worked as a general assignment reporter for a decade. And I turned 2-minute stories for 3 newscasts every day. And I thought that was it. That was what I was going to do. And then I decided to go freelance. I decided, okay, I'll keep doing those 2-minute packages, but I'm only going to do them on the outdoors. And I thought that was it. That was going to be it. And then I heard Ken Burns do a podcast and he talked about working on all these major projects and doing 9 shows at a time. And I thought, that's crazy. Ooh, but I'm intrigued, right? And so I went from 2-minute news packages in the 10 o'clock news to half-hour shows. And I want to say that this is it, right? These half-hour shows, this is it. I really get to dig in on an issue. No more 2-minute quick and dirty turns. It's spending a lot of time and really digging in on the issue and giving you something of value. But regardless of if it's 2 minutes or 26 minutes, as long as I'm helping you connect with nature, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I've always wanted to do that. And that's a significant achievement for me personally. But then I think I was born the same year as the Endangered Species Act. I've watched a lot of animals recovered from being endangered in my 50 years. My whole life, it's all been about recovering these animals that have been on the list. And it shows me something about humanity and our planet. Both are resilient. So you never give up on the wild. You never give up on yourself because the wild is not done yet and we are not done yet. So there's always this motivation to keep going regardless of how horrible things might seem. The aha moment is the fact that the wild is not done and we are not done. I am not done. Never give up on anything.
Very good. Very good. One last question, and you've gone through this with salmon, and you've had the showings, the what was that? The big event, the that
Oh,
first
the premieres and the
the
film tours.
yeah, premiere and the film tours. I would imagine you've had young kids, I don't know, maybe elementary school, middle school, high school, college, come up to you and say, "Wow, I want to do what you do." And I'm sure that's going to happen again for the premiere of On Grizzly Ground. What advice would you have for those kids, the young adults who are trying to figure out how can I don't want to work a 9 to 5 job. I don't want to be an accountant, a mechanic, a coach, whatever. But I want to do what you do. What advice would you have for them?
Advice for someone that says to me, I want to do what you do,
Yeah.
work 10 times harder, right? I mean, I started my career and I was in a male dominated industry. Then that was news. Then I made it even more difficult for myself by entering the outdoor space, which is even more male dominated. I'm a minority in my field. And I love that you're seeing more diversity. It's such an important thing. But there are a lot of days when I'm still the lone woman in the wood with the beards. And I just dismiss that. And a lot of times I can't even tell you how many times I've been told what I do for a living is not for girls. I don't buy that for 1 minute because it's for anybody. Mother Nature doesn't care if you're a man or a woman. What I do for a living is what I choose to do for a living, regardless of my gender. And so that's an important thing to remember. You're going to hear no, move past the no, keep going. Never give up on yourself. But also, you have to be better at everything you do, especially if you're the minority. You have to work harder, faster, follow up more, be dependable. Everything has to be at another level. You have to set your own bar and then raise your own bar. Expect a lot from yourself. Work for it rather than wish for it. Hands down. Wishing for it gets you nowhere. Work for it rather than wish for it.
Very good. And thank you so much for that gift. I whoever hears that message is really it's an important one, and take it to heart. We appreciate that. Kris, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, and especially about the premiere of On Grizzly Ground, where's the best place for them to go?
Go to ongrizzlyground.com. Everything you need is there.
Okay. And any social sites that you want to send people to, or can they get to the
I
social
am,
sites?
yeah, I'm active. Kris Millgate is on Facebook. And then you look for that also on Instagram. So Facebook and Instagram, look for Kris Millgate. You'll find all kinds of things there. Sometimes I even post stuff from my backyard. I had a hummingbird moth in my backyard the other night, so that's always a fun thing to post. But yeah, look for Kris Millgate and you'll find out all kinds of things that happen outside.
Fantastic. Well, Kris, I know you are busy, and like me, you have a presentation to prepare for the Outdoor Writers Association of America's annual conference and down at Gulf Shores in September. But I do appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to join us again on the Outdoor Adventure Series and to chat about your new project on Grizzly Ground. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Listen, stay in the line. We're going to do a quick close, and you and I can have a final chat. All right, folks, we have just been chatting with Kris Millgate. She is an Emmy-nominated outdoor journalist. She's the CEO of Tightline Media and the producer of the soon-to-be released On Grizzly Ground, this documentary about grizzlies in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Lots of videos. She didn't mention the YouTube, but I actually shared the YouTube playlist yesterday on my Facebook page. Like, guess who I'm interviewing? And I really appreciated all those likes and like, oh yeah. But really some wonderful information today about Kris's project and really the passion for just what she gets to do in her backyard, not only whether it's watching just the sunsets, the sunrises, the stars, the wildlife, but it's all up there in this wonderful area of the country where Kris calls home. Now, if you'd like to learn more about On Grizzly Ground, do check out their website, ongrizzlyground.com. We'll provide a backlink to it, as well as to Kris's social sites. As for us, you can find us on outdooradventureseries.com and also on LinkedIn and on Facebook on our Outdoor Adventure Series pages. And of course, wherever you listen to your podcast, just search for Outdoor Adventure Series and you will find us. And we appreciate likes, comments, and sharing to anybody who you think will get value and enjoy these episodes. Until next time, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day, and we will look forward to having you join us on another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. Take care now.